Another live Patriots beat. I'm Ryan Spagnoli, joined with me, Alex Barth from 98.5 The Sports Hub. Barth, obviously day 12 happened today, but finally we get into the meat of camp with joint practices set for the next 2 days, with the Carolina Panthers coming to town, finished off with obviously a preseason game Friday night. Want to touch a little bit on today's practice, lighter, probably more of a lighter day, considering it's going to be a physical week for them, especially the next 2 days with a lot of these ones running against each other. Um, Anything stood out? I know the coordinators and the assistant coaches spoke today. Anything you can kind of pull from that? I know we know as much as anybody. They don't give us much,
Yeah.
but anything you found in there, I guess just the overall baseline of practice.
Yeah, today really felt like a pre-game like walkthrough, like the kind of practice you'd have on a Friday before a Sunday game. That's how they're treating these joint practices. They value these tremendously. Bill Belichick, before practice, talked about the value in this. He said that in some ways the joint practices are more valuable than the preseason games themselves when it comes to both evaluation and development. So I think today was really about being ready for what they're going to see Tuesday and Wednesday, non-padded practice, shorts and shells. The one interesting thing for me today was Isaiah Wynn was out again, and he's now missed 3 practices in a row, and he might have been limited for the last one he took part in. I don't remember exactly, but it's been a while since we've seen Isaiah Wynn, right? And I go back to that column, or I go back to the comments Thursday night from Bill after the game. Yodny Kajus is having the best camp he's ever had. Well, that's your right tackle now with Isaiah Wynn out. I wonder if things could get tight there, right? If Wynn's still out and Kajus has a big week, are we suddenly talking about, well, what kind of value can you get for Wynn? He's in the last year of his deal, things like that. I'm not saying I'm trading Isaiah Wynn off what I saw today. That's an absolute. I know people will read it as that. They should not read it as that. But if we're doing takeaways from today, and there's really not a ton of football takeaways, if we're doing football takeaways from today, it's that Wynn hasn't been out there, and you're getting to the point now that it's starting to stretch a little tight.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't want to go there yet, right? But if this
No.
continues to trend that way, we saw the same thing with Sony Michel last year. Obviously, they had much more depth at the running back position,
Right.
than they do at tackle, right?
They don't have a Ramondre Stevenson if they want to move on from Wynn. They don't have that equivalent.
James White. They had Brandon Bolden, who
Right.
obviously took on a role. They had Damian Harris, right? So it's comparing apples to oranges. But like you said, if Kajus continues to, or Kajust, it's Kajust. I think that's how you're supposed to say it, right?
Is it? It might be. You might be right, actually. Yeah.
We haven't seen him, so we wouldn't know. But if he continues to thrive at right tackle, right, I think there's too much value in letting him walk, especially considering, or I don't want to say letting him walk, trading him, right? It's the last year of his deal. You can kind of get what you can out of him and then maybe readdress the position in the offseason. But if the biggest problem with him has been staying on the field, it's been his biggest issue since he's came to New England, and it's continuing to happen, right? So, yeah, that's an interesting. And the Panthers have a good front, so Justin and Brown and that offensive line. Time to put their big point bets on for a big week, because this is a good test for them. You saw them give them pressure, a lot of problems last year down in Carolina. So this would be a good test for this unit.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to start getting in, I think that's enough on today's practice. If we want to start getting into like the joint practice preview, right, I would start there, the offensive operation. We've seen them take some strides, I think, offensively. The communication looked better today up front, but, I have it right here. Derek Brown, 7th overall pick. Brian Burns, Pro Bowler last year. Yetur Gross-Matos was the top 50 pick a year ago. Matt Ioannidis is a guy who's a veteran, who's been in this league, who has had success. That's their 4 up front. That's a really good group. And that's inside, Brown's a nose. You've got Burns on the outside. Everybody's going to get tested. Can they commute? And it's not just the offensive line. I mean, it's Mac and the backs and everybody too. It's not just can they physically block them. It's the communication. That's first and foremost. Can they set this up? Can they, identify where Burns is? Can they set their protections right? And then after that, I think Cole Strange and Derek Brown is a really fascinating head-to-head. I think Trent, for different reasons, Trent Brown and Brian Burns is a really fascinating head-to-head.
And Brian Burns and Mac Jones after last year, right? I know
that's right.
Little
that's
stir,
right. So
stir the pot a little bit, right? Does he have to watch his back a little bit? Is he going to be coming in a little hot? I don't think so. But it's something to watch for.
Yeah, no, I'd say Gross-Matos on the other side, like we just talked about. We don't know what it's going to look like at right tackle. This is going to be a really good test for the Patriots. I don't want to say offensive line because it's the blocking scheme as a whole, as I talked about with Mac Jones and the communication, but it's just going to be a really good test of what the Patriots do up front offensively. And I think this team needs this kind of test, and we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, I think too, sticking on the offense, it's a good opportunity for these guys to go up against, JC Horn, top pick last year. I know he didn't play much last year. That was kind of why they swung the deal for Gilmore. Um, but one thing we wanted to talk about, and we can get right into it,
Yeah.
Tyquan Thornton and Kalen Barnes. I forget what round Barnes was picked in, but
7th.
two Baylor guys. Barnes ran the 4.23. Thornton ran the 4.28. Obviously, guys that are probably super familiar with each other, going against each other for X amount of years at Baylor. I think this is a good test too for kind of spreading it out a little bit. Some of these guys to go up against other corners, right? Because they didn't play Thursday night, facing off against a decent Carolina. Say what you want about them, they had I don't have their splits in front of me, but up front they can get to the quarterback, right? And that obviously makes the secondary's job a lot easier. They might surprise people this year with how good that defense can be. I think that more of their question marks are on offense surrounding their quarterback situation and can Christian McCaffrey finally stay healthy and who's their number one, right? But defensively, this could be a really good unit they go up against. And if you remember last year, obviously the Giants were a train wreck, but the year prior they had a really good defense. And I think that's when that quarterback competition, not to get off track, with Mac Jones and Cam Newton kind of started to Mac started to pull away. He had a really good week and finished off with a nice a game to finish off the preseason. This is where camp spots are won for some of those bubble guys, which we can get into, but I don't want to. Obviously, it's the only football to talk about right now in terms of the Patriots, but it is meaningful because this is where those bubble guys, right, that we've been talking about, this is where you can really earn your spot.
No, this is it. I mean, if you're going to wait and just based off how I believe they operate, right? If you're going to wait how much they value the different settings over the summer in terms of making roster decisions, depth chart decisions, right? I think joint practices might be the heaviest. I would go probably joint practices 40, and I got to make sure my math is right here because this is going to add up to like 95% or 102% or something. I would go joint practices 40%, preseason games 35%. That gets me to what? 75? Yeah, that's probably about right. And then I would say probably 20% the individual padded practices, and then like 5% the non-padded practices when it's just them. Like that's how I'd break it up. I don't know that it's half the grade, these joint practices, but I think it's close. I think it's close. And I think if it's not the biggest piece of the pie, it's tied with the preseason games for the biggest piece of the pie. So no, this is, I mean, going back to when I was doing the shows with John, right? And even going back to the spring with Evan, there was a lot of, it seems like this, but we have to wait and see, right? We were doing it with Trey Nixon. We were doing it with Mac. We were doing it with Tyquan Thornton. Like, he's doing this now, but he still has to check this box. He still has to check this box. He still has to check this box, right? We're not going to know until this is what it was all building towards. This is where it all locks in now. There's no more pushing it down the road. There's no more back burner. There's no more, well, let's see what happens when. This is it. This is when it's decided. This is when all the, people say I hedge my takes by saying, well, I think this, but we really don't know until the joint practices. We're not hedging takes anymore. Like if we've said it now, this is it. This is real. This is as close as you're going to get until we get to the regular season and actually starts to really matter.
Yeah, and I think this is a good question here from Court, right? Can you explain why they go out all in joint practices, not in the actual preseason games? Is actually, it's going to be interesting to see how the offense looks, right? Because
we can leave that up here when we talk about it.
They're not gonna show anything, right, in the preseason game. What did they run? The same personnel grouping out, 93% of the time on Thursday night, right? They're gonna show that on TV, get actual film on it. Here in practice, this is where you can actually roll out what your scheme's gonna look like week one and start to put some game type situations on the field, which is why I think it's a huge week for the offense because of how much they've struggled to this point, and it'll be a big test for them. So that's the biggest thing for me is how is this offense going to work versus a really good front, and what are some of these little things that they're tweaking in this new offense, right? The Shanahan, we've talked about it multiple times. Are we actually going to see it, right? Because it'll be physical. They don't hit each other. I mean, we watch practice. same team. They're not going to hit each other. These guys, it'll get physical out there.
Yeah, and I would say too, I don't know that I'd characterize it as not going all out. I think when you're looking at like individual player evaluations, the preseason games hold a ton of value. The thing with the joint practices, and Bill talked about this morning, you can basically, so this comes in terms of full unit evaluation and also development. You can basically set up a situation you want, not know what's coming on the other side, and repeatedly rep against that, right? You can say, all right, I want to see how we react on a 3rd and 5 in the 2-minute drill when the defense is in some sort of zone coverage. And you don't know the zone coverage, but some sort of zone coverage, right? So you can rep that against players unfamiliar with your scheme, against a scheme you're unfamiliar with, and you can do it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in a row to see how it looks and how repeatable it is, right? There's certainly situational elements in preseason games that you get, but they're not guaranteed, right? Like Bill was raving, oh, we got a 2-minute drill against the Giants. Like that was huge. You're not guaranteed that. So you get full level competition against new competition, but it's in a controlled environment. And also the controlled environment element of it, it can be, guys can still get hurt. It's football anytime, but the injury risk is a little lower. And I knock on wood as I say that. The injury risk is a little lower. So I wouldn't say that they're just like, I don't know if you're not trying to go this way with the question, but I've seen people go this way. Other people go this way. It's not like they're dogging it in the preseason games. That's not what it is. It's just, I think you're afforded some really unique opportunities to replicate real football within parameters you can set up on your own that doesn't exist in the preseason game. It doesn't exist when you practice against yourself. It's the only time you can do this, and they're incredibly valuable reps. So that's why they put so much value in these practices.
Right. And getting to that game-like situation,
Yeah.
the
And
play
it's
calling.
bad too. Like there'll be stuff like, we'll probably see refs at practice tomorrow. Like you normally see that for joint practice, like stuff like that.
But I think the other thing too, sticking on offense,
yeah,
the play calling situation, it's the biggest, I guess,
we're going to learn about
coming
that
out of camp, right? Like, what are we going to see from that? We saw, what was it? Patricia was with Hoyer and Judge was with Zappi. Now with Mack in there in the starting offense, how is this going to be relayed, right? Because obviously they asked Corey about it after the game. He's like, I just, whatever's in my helmet, I call the play, right? They're not going to give us much, but this is probably the closest thing we'll see to regular season action on how they'll handle this. I don't know if you have a take on maybe what's going on or what it will look like, but I think that's fascinating too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I think this is, like I said before, this is the closest you're going to get, even maybe closer compared to some preseason action. This is the closest you're going to get to simulating what's going to happen on a game day, on like a regular season game day. So you're going to want to act as close as you would to a regular season game day. That means what I think it's safe to assume, and we don't know what's going on inside the building, but we don't know that. So we can only go with what we're seeing. I think it's safe to say what we see from the play caller these 2 days is what the plan is for the regular season. And whether that's just Patricia and then it's okay, well, it's Patricia, whether it's Patricia and Judge alternating, and maybe that means that's the plan for the regular season, or maybe that means they haven't figured it out yet and they're still testing it and they want to test it in this setting. I think it's fair to put a ton of stock into that. I really do.
Right. And I don't know if you want to get into anything else offensively, but I think defensively.
Well, I would just, a couple things offensively. You mentioned, well, I'll do this first because it's in the chat. Bailey Zappi looking panicked last week. He looked panicked early. He actually settled down really well.
I thought he did too. He made some nice throws.
Look, he wasn't amazing at the beginning of that game, but I thought he settled down really well. I think
he wasn't no Jarrett Stidham in week 1 of the preseason in Detroit, but he was pretty good.
Yeah, and
he might be the best preseason player, by the way. He's having
Stidham?
a hell of a preseason in Vegas. Yeah,
Danny Etling had that 78. Oh, you're talking about like overall. Okay. Yeah, no, I think overall there's stuff to work on. I think overall you should come away happy with what Bailey Zappi did. And yeah, they blitzed him a ton, which was weird.
Yeah.
The one other thing I want to talk about offensively when it comes to Tyquan Thornton. So you mentioned before he's going to get to go against Kalen Barnes, another elite speed guy. They matched up against each other at Baylor. That's not it for Tyquan Thornton. The biggest question for him, and I know some people who watch this show think this isn't a big question regarding Thornton. And if you don't believe it is, that's totally fine. But a significant part of the discourse around Thornton, for right or wrong, was how is he going to be able to perform with his frame against big physical corners, whether it's pressing him at the line, whether it's battling for the ball down the field. Well, you look at the Panthers corners here. I mean, they got 2 top 10 picks in CJ Henderson and JC Horn. Those are big physical guys, right? They got some safeties. Jeremy Chin, he's going to be able to kind of knock Tyquan Thornton around. The really interesting guy I want to see Tyquan Thornton go against, though, is a 5th-round pick from 2021, a guy named Keith Taylor, 6'3", 195.
It's a big,
like, he's the guy. They're talking about him. And remember, the Panthers are in the NFC South. They're talking about him like he's the guy. He's your, why am I blanking? 14 for Tampa. Chris, why am I blanking on his name? The receiver, Godwin.
Oh, Chris
He's
Godwin.
your right. Oh. He's your Chris Godwin stopper. He, that big, fast receiver. This is the guy you're putting on him. So between all those corners, Henderson, Horn, Barnes as well, Taylor, there's a lot. Thank you for pointing out. I can't believe I just blanked on that. It's been.
I thought you were talking about 2014. I'm like 6'3", 195. You talking Brandon Browner?
No. I'm saying like as a matchup guy, right?
Right.
And not to compare Tyquan Thornton and Chris Godwin. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But like these are the kind of corners that Tyquan Thornton's going to see in games. Until he proves that he can beat them, like a burner like that who's 6'3", you don't fight him with speed because he's probably faster than your fastest guy. His speed is so elite. The general consensus is, will you put a big guy on him and try to bully him out of the game? If he can prove he can beat that, then he starts getting the speed matchups, and he's going to be faster than most of the speed matchups. And that's how you build like a legit number 1 wide receiver, like resume and blueprint, right? Or he's going to get doubles and it's going to open things up for other guys. This is the first step in how do you stop this guy? It's, well, we probably can't outrun him, so let's just try to beat him up and see what happens. If he can beat these guys, it really opens the door for the Patriots offense, and then you start talking about him. Then he enters the category, and this is the phrase everybody wants to hear because it's what the Patriots haven't had in 5 or 6 years. Then it opens the door for matchup nightmare talk, right? So let's not get ahead of ourselves, but I think you can start to kind of see some of that this week.
And he's checked every box, right? From the spring to camp.
And here comes more boxes.
This is it for him. You talked about checking those boxes. This is a big opportunity for him, right? Because you saw the report last week from Doug Kite about Nelson Aguilar potentially being, that odd man out. And, how do you fit, right? There's going to be some, we could talk about all day, this wide receiver kind of competition between that 4, 5, 6 spot. If Thornton can give you a little bit more maybe than you had thought on draft night, how do you keep a guy like that off the field that can present that much of a nightmare for defenses, right? Like, I think Nelson Aguilar is probably ahead of him, right? It's all changes in terms of personnel and what they want to do. But I have a problem with giving Nelson Aguilar more snaps because he's more expensive than Tyquan Thornton if he's ready to play, right? I'm not saying roll him out there. He's going to have 10 catches week 1, but if he can, like you said, if you can check all those boxes in terms of the types of corners you're going to go up against, the sky's the limit, and you got to find a way to get him on the field.
In Bill's, for better or worse, I think some people love this about, I love this about Bill. Some people hate this about Bill. He doesn't care where you're getting paid. He doesn't care where you were drafted.
Right. No, yeah.
If you're the better player, he's going to put you in. Look at perfect example at the same position. They used a 1st-round pick on N'Keal Harry, the first-round receiver Bill had ever taken. But Jacoby Myers was the better player, and he got the opportunities as an undrafted guy. Like, I'm not worried. If Thornton's truly better, I'm not worried about him not getting snaps. To me, it's a matter of Devontae Parker's had his injury issues. Thornton's kind of on the slimmer side. Are you worried about him getting beat up? We've even seen Aguilar at times get beat up in his career. Like, it's not necessarily about, well, you can't keep Aguilar because Thornton needs to play. It becomes,
I mean, they have the cap space, right? It's not like
it more so becomes
financial issues.
Well, if you move Aguilar, you're worried about how thin you are at wide receiver, right? Then what happens if you lose Parker? Are you going to wish you had him? And then you get into, well, is Trey Nixon or Lil Jordan Humphrey or Christian Wilkerson showing you enough? And that's my roster projections out right now, 98.5thesportshub.com. I kind of address some of that. You get into that conversation, but I'm not too, if Thornton proves it, and again, he's been great. He's still got some boxes to check. This is a huge week for him to check those boxes. If he does continue to check them, I'm not worried about them not putting him on the field. I don't think that will be an issue.
Right. And kind of on the defensive side now, right? We saw last week and really all camp. Jawan Bentley didn't play. Gerard Mayo said it today. That's his room. He's the leader of the room.
Yeah.
He's kind of your prototypical. He's going to be right in the middle, probably wearing the green dot, the leader of that front seven. But I think the biggest thing that they've put an emphasis on this offseason was speed, and athleticism. We've been calling for it for years, and I think that Bills game was just wow, they really need this.
Right.
And they roll out on Thursday night, McMillan, Uche, Jennings, and Mac Wilson. Right, ton of speed. You
Right.
saw, they were covering extremely well, and I think that's going to help them when they face these teams with elite pass catching backs. Well, the best one when he's healthy, there's no questions. Christian McCaffrey, he's healthy. He's going to practice. I think that's a big test for them early on to see how they can match up and how much really, like I said, faster. Could you imagine, flashback to last year, if they had the same joint practice and he was healthy, he would have ran all over them.
Oh yeah.
Like Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, it would have just been matchup nightmare. But I think this year,
well, remember how
so
relieved we all were. He was a game time decision for that game in Carolina.
Right.
And people were swinging their picks based on whether or not he would play. I would throw into this too. And he's not, McCaffrey's probably the best pass catching back in the league. Certainly is now that James White's retired. Actually, Alvin Kamara's up there. It's those two. It's Kamara and McCaffrey.
Yeah, for sure. I think McCaffrey, when he's healthy, there's nobody better.
McCaffrey might be more consistent. Kamara has those games where he's like, he's special. But Chuba Hubbard's a really capable pass catching back too. And I just think overall, the linebackers, the safeties, they're going to be tested in that regard. And I think that's an area they need to be tested. So Mac Wilson, Raekwon McMillan, Anthony Jennings, I think even Jabril Peppers, we haven't seen a ton of him. I think he's still maybe working his way back from that knee injury last year, that torn ACL. We're going to learn a lot about that group this week.
And did he tear it in camp, or was it like early in the year?
No, it was, I think it was
week
late
3?
September, early October, because he played last year.
He's definitely ahead of schedule. I know these things aren't the 16 months that we're used to, but remember, he's 11 months out now, so he's probably close, but at the same time, he's a veteran. He's somebody that's going to help you. There's no sense of kind of risking him and throwing him out there, but he'll help versus, these types of matchups, when the guns start firing and it's time for some real football. But yeah, I liked what I saw from Mac Wilson. I think that's a guy that, obviously the swap was great for both teams, for great players. I think both those guys kind of needed a fresh start. But if you remember when he came out, he was a 5th round pick, I believe, out of Bama. Was it a 5th or a 6th?
5th. He was a 5th. I thought 4th or 5th. So if we both think 5th, it's probably 5th, right?
Yeah, and I think there was a report, and you'd have to pull it up, but Saban was almost
5th round pick.
Not disappointed, but I think that was a guy that probably would have benefited from another year at Alabama. Could have, turned into a first round pick or an early day 2 pick, but he left early and had a tough. Those guys typically, when they come here, can kind of figure it out. So I think that's a guy that might have a huge role in this defense, and somebody that, I'm talking Bruins terms, but like your 7th player award type of player for them. Somebody that kind of overexceeds expectations. He might turn into their true chess piece linebacker that we've kind of been itching for the last few years.
Right. The thing is, that team still had, just as to why he left, that team still had Christian
Dylan
Miller.
Moses.
That team had Dylan Moses, right? And I believe Dylan Moses was healthy that year. It's not necessarily that he needed another year to develop. He just never got in the spotlight, right? So, and actually, they had Anthony Jennings too. He never got in the spotlight, right? So there wasn't as much tape on him. If he had stayed one more year, Christian Miller graduated that year. So he would have been a starter the next year, that 2019 team. And yeah, he probably would have been a top 50 pick. You just never fault a guy for wanting the money.
No,
to get paid.
No, but I'm saying,
you're absolutely right.
Maturing now,
He really is. And he's a guy that I know was like one of, we talk about Bill's guys in terms of players, right? Saban does the same thing. And he was supposedly one of Saban's guys. And I think that's part of the reason Saban was disappointed he left early. I have no problem having high hopes for Mac Wilson. I really think he's going to be something for them.
It's flipping over to corner. I think this is another interesting spot, like wide receiver, right? A lot of snaps to be made outside your kind of top 2. We've seen John Jones bump outside. You have to, you assume, since he played 0 snaps on Thursday night, Marcus Jones probably projects as your week 1 starting slot corner with what he's shown in camp. And like I said, a telltale factor is, hey, he didn't play on Thursday, which means they like what they see. But Sean Wade has looked good. He looked good Thursday night. Jawan Williams has had a tough camp. This is kind of a make or break it year for him. We've been saying it since, the 2019 draft, whenever he was picked behind N'Keal Harry. I'm blanking on some guys, but then, Jack Jones, how is he? He's a very aggressive. I think we saw it on Thursday.
He's very
Extremely
aggressive.
aggressive, right?
He's
So,
going to be,
and we
you got
talked
to hold
about it.
on
Those
tight with
good
him.
quarterbacks are gonna they'll one little fake and he's done, right? He's gonna
Yeah.
get toasted.
He's
That's a
just got to
guy
see
who,
some more football.
yeah, Malcolm Butler too. So this is a good test this week too, for these corners to earn those, earn snaps. We talked about it last week that's a competitive position that's seen a ton of turnover in the last few years. It's time for some of these younger guys to kind of step up. Miles Bryant, another one. I know he's probably more as a safety, but we saw him play in the slot a little bit last
Yeah.
year. But
yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good test. I just go down the depth chart here. Robbie Anderson, Rashad Higgins, Terrace Marshall, DJ Moore, Charleston Rambo is a guy I really liked in the draft. Shi Smith, like they've got not all those guys are necessarily stars, but like those are all guys that can play and are going to test the corners. Like those are guys baseline you should be able to cover, right? We've wondered about some of these guys. Is Malcolm Butler ready? And I'm not saying the Patriots don't have those guys, but I think at a certain point, you face the same guys over and over again. You get used to tendencies. Like for those fringe guys, and the way I look at it right now, and again, I posted my roster projection this morning, 985thesportshub.com, and I touched on this. I think between Malcolm Butler, Miles Bryant, and Sean Wade, I think those three guys, and if you want to throw in Jawan Williams, you can, if you still think he is a shot by default. I think it's those 3 or 4 guys competing for one spot at corner. Like, I really think that's what it's going to come down to. So this is a huge week for that competition.
Yeah, and it's kind of similar to wide receivers. They probably carry a little bit more because some of those guys on the back end will probably contribute a little bit more on special teams.
Right.
But you have to figure Jalen Mills, Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, and John Jones. It's a tongue twister. They're all locks. They're going to play.
Terrence Mitchell.
And Terrence Mitchell, right.
So that's
there's
5
right there.
That's 5. So that's where I get that
7.
last spot, right.
And then does that knock them, then you can kind of get into the gymnastics with it in terms of, maybe they'll carry an extra receiver, but they have to let go of another corner. So I like that. One spot for those guys, like you said, maybe they carry a little bit more. But if I had to go off what I've seen so far, I think it's probably Sean Wade. Younger player has shown some sort of promise, seemed to develop a little bit after spending most of the year last year on the practice squad. And I think he's looked the best, right? It'd be Malcolm Butler's probably the most tenured and veteran guy who might be able to help you more early on when you're kind of in that, see what you are type of football team. But I think in the long haul, a guy like Sean Wade might be able to help you not only towards the back half of this year, but going forward.
So the one thing I wonder, and Wade, if Wade makes it, like all these guys give you something different, right? If Wade makes it, it's his versatility. Like you said, he can play on the outside, on the boundary. He's pretty good at both. Going beyond that, you mentioned Miles Bryant. He gives you some versatility in terms of he can play in the slot. He can play some safety. You talk about, well, can he give you enough on special teams to make it? And we talk about this all the time with Patriots bubble guys. Was he going to give you enough in the kicking game? This one almost feels like the opposite, right? Where they have 2 elite punt returners in Marcus Jones and Jabril Peppers. I don't know that Miles Bryant being a good punt returner, and he did look good Thursday night, but I don't know that him being an elite punt returner gets him on the team. Maybe if he's covering kicks, it's another story. Well, no, that's what I'm saying, right? So yeah. I think it's normally we say, well, yeah, okay, he gives you something on defense, but can he give you something in the kicking game because he's not really going to play on defense? This is the other way around. I think he gives you something in the kicking game. Does he give you enough on defense? And then with Malcolm Butler and my roster projection, I have Malcolm Butler as the guy from the 3 on. I think Sean Wade's been really good. He was a tough cut for me. But if you take Malcolm Butler off, that's a young group. That's a really young
Your most tenured guy is John Jones, who's learning. I don't want to say learning, but he's in a new spot.
No, he's playing a new position. No, you can say that.
He's
playing a new
outside.
Position. Jalen Mills, your other corners, it's his second year. Terrence Mitchell is first. It's a young group. And, I look at the way they broke up the teams for that in-stadium practice 2 weeks ago. We talked about, the blue team seemed like the roster locks. Malcolm Butler was on the blue team. He didn't play a ton in the preseason opener. He played pretty much about as much as Terrence Mitchell, who we think is a roster lock. I'm not saying I would pick Butler. I would probably lean Sean Wade here, but I think right now, based on what I'm observing within the building, I think Malcolm Butler for now has that last spot. I don't think it's locked up. I totally think it could change. Like I said, there's the veteran angle matters, but I think Shaun Wade or Miles Bryant could be good enough that they say, you know what? We've got veteran safeties. We'll just go young at corner, and that's what it is. Like, I wouldn't put it past them. But for right now, I think it's Malcolm Butler.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And like I said, this week will be a big test for guys like Wade. How much did, the year off affect Malcolm Butler? Little things like that you can kind of pull away because, we'll be talking tomorrow about,
Right.
oh, yeah, Malcolm Butler got toasted 3 times, right? But, made a nice play. And
Like that, but that's the
Shaun
thing.
Wade, right? Like it's
It
just
right.
assumption at this point.
No, but that's the thing. Like if Malcolm Butler gets toasted tomorrow and Shaun Wade is a great practice, that might be something where, okay, my next roster projection is going to look a little different. Like, again, I said it at the beginning of the show, no more hedging takes, no more, yeah, he looked good, but we need to see him and this and that. No, this is when we need to see him. This is it. So yeah, no, I it's totally still up for grabs. And I think this week goes a long way. And next week too, against the Raiders, that's where I'll hedge the take. There are 4 joint practices. We're not putting all the stake into just one of them. It's the 4 collectively, but yeah, no, tomorrow I think there's a chance to make some big observations.
Right. And I think, we kind of went into the show a lighter day in terms of practice and kind of gearing up for some of these key matchups tomorrow. But I don't know if you want to classify this as the Boston Sports Minute, but I wanted to talk
No,
about.
this is still Patriots. The Boston Sports Minute is just Bruins, Celtics, Red
Okay. All
Sox,
right.
maybe
That's fine. I'm
Revs,
learning.
maybe BC if it's foot. No, because this is good. We should figure this out. I think BC if it's football still qualifies as Patriots beat
Yeah. We'll see how
because
they are
it
this year.
will make it draft related. I'm a big Phil Dracovic guy. I think if we were getting to like events happening in Boston, maybe I don't no, this right now, what you're gonna say is still definitely Patriots beat.
Yeah. I wanted to get your take on it because if you look at Twitter, right, like you have CD Lamb, whatever, he was like 93. And whoever,
Yeah.
if you take stock in it, whatever, I really don't. I enjoy it because
It being the NFL top 100 list.
and it's voted on by the players and the coaches. So they see it as much as we do. They see it from a much different eye. They're on the field, right? Like, so there is some stock to take in it, but people are all up in arms. Mac Jones being ranked 85, I don't have an issue with that. I think considering his rookie year, you saw what a lot of his peers said about him. But if you look at Twitter, it's like, CD Lamb 93, Odell was like 90. They have like 200
Odell
retweets.
played half the season.
And Mac Jones has like 3,000 combined retweets, quote tweets, like 1,500 replies. It just makes people so mad. I don't understand it. And obviously I'm sure the players they don't take too much stock. And I guess maybe it depends on what position, but he surely doesn't care if he's ranked 85 or 285. That's just the type of guy he is. But it blows my mind how aggravating it, and it mostly comes from a lot of the Bills fans who I respect because they're so passionate, but they are so
No.
mad about that. Primarily Bills fans, it seems like.
No,
What's your take on it? Did you
because the
like?
Bills fans don't know what to talk. Here's the thing: the Bills fans will come out today and say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's all BS. It doesn't count. Mac sucks." And then when Josh Allen ends up the highest ranked quarterback of all the quarterbacks on the list will be gospel in Buffalo.
Right? Yeah.
1 through 84, perfect. 85 and below, a travesty. It should be deleted. Like, because that's just how Bills fans think. They don't know what they're watching. Everything's Josh Allen. They will put down other players on their own team who play well if they think it means giving more credit to Josh Allen. It's absurd. As for Mac at 85, I'm surprised he was on the list, not because I don't think he deserves it. I just didn't know he had this kind of respect around the NFL. I really didn't. I didn't think he was, and look, he's a quarterback of the Patriots. He's visible, but in that sense, I didn't think he was visible enough to get to this point. It surprised me in a good way. There's real, and you mentioned it's. I don't think it's coaches. I think it's just players.
It could be. Yeah, I know it's obviously the players. I did see coaches somewhere, but
Okay. I thought it was just play. Either way, it works. I thought it was just players, but the point being, there's respect for him around the league, and if we're going to freak out about and this is where we kind of cross sports here, and maybe get in the Boston Sports Minute. If we're going to freak out about reports that the Miami Heat have people in their front office who love Jaylen Brown, which of course they do, they're basketball executives. He's a good player. Doesn't mean that they need to go out and trade for him. Yeah, other NFL players thinking Mac Jones is a top 100 player. That says something. It's not purely, predictive of future success. I wouldn't say that, but what he did last year, people noticed. And you're not seeing, I can't imagine at this point, because I think they're through the top 50 now. Yeah, because Judon was 52, which is also probably about right. I might have him a little higher. We didn't see Trevor Lawrence on the list. We didn't see Zach Wilson on the list. And I was told coming into the season, Zach Wilson was the guy that, Mac had a great rookie year, but Zach Wilson's about to take this leap, and they've got him weapons and a coach and everything. Meanwhile, I don't know, did you see what Garrett Wilson said today?
I did not. What did he say?
He was asked the difference between Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco. It's 2022. We're still talking about Joe Flacco. So wait. So he was asked the difference between Zach Wilson, second overall pick, and the remnants of Joe Flacco. And he said, he said, well, with Joe Flacco, this isn't a direct quote, but he said, with Joe Flacco, he knows where to put the ball. And then he said, Joe throws a wide receiver friendly ball. That's a direct quote. Joe Flacco throws a wide receiver friendly ball. Now, remember the question. He wasn't asked, what do you think of Joe Flacco? He was asked, what's the difference between Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson? So I don't know. You tell me, Ryan. You tell me in the chat. Am I going too far into reading into that to say that Zach
or maybe
Wilson
the injury's a lot worse and they have to gear up?
Well, no. I wouldn't say that. But I would say, am I reading too far into that and saying Zach Wilson does not throw a wide receiver friendly ball? And this is not new. There have been reports out of Jets camp that Joe Flacco's been the better quarterback. Could you imagine, Ryan? Could you imagine the S storm we would get around here if Tyquan Thornton was asked the difference between Mac Jones and Brian Hoyer and just the entire answer was only complimenting Brian Hoyer? Can you imagine the Mets? So to get back to the point, Zach Wilson was the guy that we were told put the league on notice and did enough late in the season and had the flashes that he was about to take off. Well, Zach Wilson's peers didn't think so. Other NFL players didn't think so, but they thought Mac Jones did. Because some of this it is a little projecting. It is mostly, what did they do in 2021? But some of it is, looking forward to 2022. Who do you think will be good? I'll put stock into this. I'm fine. And look, if Josh Allen is wrongfully voted the best quarterback, I guess I will have to put stock into that too. I'm handcuffing myself here, but I am totally fine putting stock into this. Not everything, but you can put some stock into this.
Right. Yeah. And it's based on last year. So if you're going to go on quarterbacks, I'd probably have Davis Mills right behind Mac Jones.
Some of it is supposedly predictive, like, going into this season. Right. So yeah. I'm just saying you probably heard it too. Zach Wilson, another one, Tua, right? Oh, well, yeah. He was really rough last year. You can't have him for last year. But Zach Wilson, I was told Zach Wilson did enough at the end of last season and had these flashes in games. And Ryan,
there's no question, not to make the whole show about him, but there's flashes. He has a ton of talent.
So you weren't here last year. You've
never been a big Wilson guy. Even we were talking about
my sixth quarterback in that draft.
You did.
I did. So I'm just like, I was told there were enough flashes last year, but now he's getting beat out by, for exaggeration, a 36-year-old Joe Flacco. I don't know how old Joe Flacco actually is. I thought Joe Flacco had retired. Oh, he's 37.
Yeah,
I was trying to exaggerate going over. He's 37. The guy who's going to turn the corner is now getting beat out by a 37-year-old Joe Flacco. I rest my case.
All right. Well, Boston Sports Minute to finish up.
Big weekend for the here. Yeah.
Big weekend for the Sox. I'm not going to say it. It's. I think it's way too late, but you saw what this team could have been.
Come on now.
With Michael Wacha. What are they out of the wild card? 4.5?
I believe it's 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think if you had Michael Wacha, you probably have a couple more wins. I liked what we saw from him. The Yankees are broken, by the way. That lineup's nothing without Carpenter and Stanton, and that's it for me on the. I won't give them the time of day because of how bad they've been, but I know you're a bigger Red Sox guy than me, so.
So two quick things on the Red. Well, really one on the Yankees, one on the Red Sox. The Yankees collapsing is terrific. 3-10 in their last 13. They haven't won a series in the month of August. I was told I was told a lot of things by New York. I was told this team was a wagon. They were going to catch the Mariners. They were going to be the greatest team of the modern era. They don't even have the best record in the American League right now. That's the Houston Astros, who might actually be a wagon. So love watching the Yankees collapse. That's always fun. The reason I want to do a Boston Sports Minute, though, is because there was a tweet from the Red Sox. This was like right before we hopped on. I think this was around like 3:00. They tweeted out a graphic of Rafael Devers that says the only player in the majors with 25 plus home runs and 30 plus doubles in each of the last 3 full seasons. And the caption to the tweet is, there's only one Raffy. The reason I bring that up,
they better pay him.
That kind of, there's only one Raffy now, because here's why this ticked me off. There is only one Raffy. You're right. He's a unique player. And I understand.
Arguably the best left-handed hitter in baseball.
MVP candidate. Like perennial MVP candidate. I know he's not this year because guys are having insane seasons, but he's going to be an MVP candidate down the road multiple times. What ticked me, and I get saving money in other places, right? You don't just throw money at everybody. Like, again, Benintendi. No, but listen, like Benintendi was just here, right? And there was some talk about, well, did they trade him too early? I was fine. Like, Andrew Benintendi's not a guy you pay, especially when you have Alex Verdugo, who's redundant, right? But the reason you don't pay those guys is so you can back up the Brinks truck for a guy like Rafael Devers, because as the Red Sox correctly noted in their tweet, there's only one Raffy. And here's why this kills me, Ryan, because we saw it with Mookie. We saw it with John Lester. We're seeing it right now with Xander Bogaerts. Those are guys that there's only one. There's only one John. There's only one John Lester. There's only one Xander Bogaerts. There's only one Mookie Betts. Until the nerds get involved and they break out their fake math stats, and all of a sudden, there's only one Raffy until you get 3 or 4 quad A players.
I was going to say,
give you half them. Who will give you half the production, but for 10th the price. And that's better value. Like,
that's Tampa Bay for you.
That tweet ticked me off so much, because it should be everything that's right with Boston. It should be, there's only one Rafael Devers, and he's here because we're the Boston Red Sox and we pay these guys, right? But no, there's only one Rafael Devers until Chaim Bloom gets his hands on his contract, and all of a sudden they're replacing him with 4 or 5 guys making 1/10 of the money. And it's ultimately not as good, but hey, we saved a couple bucks here and there. Sent me up a freaking wall with that tweet. And that one, along with the Nesson 360 tweet, need to come back when he inevitably gets traded wrongfully this offseason.
Yep, it's unfortunate. It really isn't. And, they didn't pay these guys so they could have an opportunity to keep these guys around. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with the 2 of those. But dull time in Boston sports, obviously just training camp and lousy August baseball. But I think these will be fun come October, November, when we have some Bruins Celtics kind of getting going. But other than that, I think that wraps us up for today. We'll both be down at camp tomorrow, so to check into us for some updates. As well as a kind of a joint practice breakdown afterwards. We'll figure out a time that works for us. I'd probably say sometime around this time.
Probably, 5 or 6, depending on how late it goes.
Yeah,
I think this too, like Evan. So this is fun now. I get to throw Evan under the bus because he's not here. Although last time I made that joke, everybody got mad in the comments. It's all good with me and Evan. I talked to him today. We get along perfectly fine. But
you guys are best friends. Will you stop?
Evan liked doing the 3 or 4 o'clock show because he wanted to be done earlier. But I value our live audience. I know more people can watch around this time, so I always wanted to do the show at this time.
I'm the rookie here, so
now we can do a little more of that. That's true. I have more say now. So
yes, you do. So we'll tune in tomorrow. We'll break down some actual football.
Tomorrow it gets real. Yep.
One of my favorite days of training camp. I'm not a big training camp guy, but I love the joint practices. So check us out. We'll talk to